Okay, you did what God said. You listened to what he told you to do. Now you're left in a spot where you're looking around and you can't really tell that he's doing literally anything. It seems like maybe he disappeared. It seems like maybe you misunderstood, and now you're discouraged. If you've ever found yourself in a situation like that, or if you're currently in a situation like that, I think Zechariah will be helpful to you.
I think this is a classic tale of the physical versus the spiritual. So we've got like the do's and don'ts of the physical realm of what our faith looks like versus the actual spiritual side of things of like, where is your heart in the midst of your physical outward actions?
So we've been reading Ezra, Haggai, and Zechariah kind of in sequence. And if anything, Ezra kind of serves as like the historical background sort of what's happening. Mm-hmm. Haggai seems to be concerned about the temple itself and how it's going to be rebuilt and what's going to happen.
Like the get it done book.
Yep. And now Zechariah is the one that's kind of talking about the spiritual condition of the people. Mm-hmm. And so it's sort of this cool correlation between like God's temple, the building where God dwells, and God's people, the people where God dwells. And Zechariah has like a clear frustration. I say clear with hesitation. You got to kind of dig in to see where he's coming from, because this first 7 chapters, we're looking at Zechariah 1-7, can be a little bit confusing because there's a lot of visions and a lot of symbolism. But essentially, Zechariah is in a place where he has traveled from Babylon back to Jerusalem, along with these other prophets that we've been reading. And when he looks around and sees the people, he's kind of disappointed. Because Isaiah has promised restoration, Jeremiah has promised restoration. The whole theme of this return has been restoration. Like Cyrus makes this decree. It's amazing. It's incredible. The people are finally allowed to go home and rebuild the temple. They hurry up. They build an altar. They hurry up. They build a foundation. And that's kind of it. The building's not done. The people aren't ready. And it seems like even their faithfulness is being tested.
Yeah, but what's so interesting, though, too, is, like, they kind of begrudgingly do this because they're so downtrodden. They're, like, so sad. They're so whatever. So in the midst of building this temple, they're hitting those setbacks. And it's like a shoddy work that they're, like, able to put together. It's not what it was before. Like, you've got literally the older men, the older generations crying because it's not what it was before. It's, like, painfully obvious. And they're also... like, their hearts are not being turned in the same way that, like, all these prophets beforehand were saying or, like, anticipating. And on top of all of that, I believe that the exiled or previously exiled people are, like, pretty bummed out that they're not, like, this crazy, awesome world power again that other people are looking to. They're just kind of like the Joe Schmoes that got sent back. And I think that's probably, like, a humbling thing for them that they're not really excited about.
One of the best examples that we heard of that was when we were reading in Ezra that the people that were already living in that area, they sent that letter to the king Artaxerxes, and Artaxerxes made them stop. So They thought they were going to return. They thought that God was going to be powerful on their behalf, and now they're not even allowed to finish the project. So, I mean, just to get in their mindset, like they have been waiting. Some of these guys, like the old men that were weeping when the foundation was laid, like these guys have been there before, and they were carried into exile, and they were hearing this message of restoration. Now they've been restored. They're expecting that God's going to give them incredible power and incredible like providence, and they can't see evidence of that really anywhere. I mean, when they look out over the temple, it's like a couple foundation stones and an altar. And it just reminds them of how broken they are.
Well, it's interesting, too. In chapter 4, verse 10, it says, "For whoever has despised the day of the small things shall rejoice and see the plumb line in the hand of Zerubbabel." So basically, like, what this is saying is, like, don't you dare take for granted these small beginnings, these small starts of something that was literally, like, dead and dying. God has given life back to it and like another chance back to it. And although it seems like pathetic and sad and miserable, don't you dare discredit, the small things that will someday be like gloriously obvious that God is and has been doing things all along. And I think we can get ourselves into those places too, where you're just like, again, one of those like throw your hands up in the air, like this is ridiculous. I'm not doing this. It's not worth it. It's not worth my time. Because sometimes we have like prideful hearts that are seeking out other things instead of God's glory. So we can be very, susceptible to just being like, meh, this isn't worth it. I'm not the center of attention, so I don't really care to put my time into this.
And we have today, at least I do, maybe I'm the only person and I need a counselor or something, but we have today this perception that what is big and grandiose is what matters. And if it's not big and grandiose, then it doesn't matter. And that's what's happening here. Like the people were literally like that quote, small beginnings. That's what they were saying. Like, oh, I guess we're just small beginnings. Like basically like, I guess we're just worthless. And God says, hey, don't despise these. I'm going to see you through. Stop complaining. And I guess like don't be distracted by the huge grandiose things that seem like they're incredible. I mean, Israel before exile was huge.
Was that? Yeah.
They had tons of prosperity. They had tons of authority and they hated God. And so God's basically giving this reality check, I think, to Zechariah and through Zechariah saying, hey, listen, what matters is your obedience. Be
and
obedient to me. And I know like as a pastor in the past, we do different church events and things, and people get really excited about events where there's a lot of people. And people do not get excited about events where there's not a lot of people. And so I know like just the real world application for myself is that many times those small events is where real discipleship was happening. And like there was a real hunger for God's Spirit. There was a real hunger for obedience to his word. And I was really excited about those tiny little environments. But a lot of other people were really excited about those giant environments where literally nothing was happening. Like we had a giant band and we had a lot of people coming out to win Xboxes, but nobody was seeking the heart. I mean, I shouldn't say nobody, but very few of those people were seeking the heart of the Lord. And maybe you found yourself in a similar situation. Like what God is looking for here is obedience, not reputation, not opulence, just obedience.
Well, it's interesting too because it's a really like slippery slope. It's a really tight rope to walk because there are good things, but oftentimes you have to be so cautious. I mean, look at the Israelites. They are a shining example of this when like you feel the prosperity that God gives you, you can go one of two ways. And if you go the one way, you are more than likely going to fall into a place of exile like this. And they want back so badly what got them in their troubled place in the first place. So that's like really interesting perspective of how willing they would be to go back to such a terrible place because of what it gave to them.
So Zechariah is kind of split in half, and actually we've read some of Zechariah already, but this kind of like downer part is really laying the foundation for the need of the people to be obedient, to trust the Lord, to allow the Lord to work. Actually, you had talked about chapter 4 earlier. There's a part of chapter 4 that says, not by might, not by power, but by my spirit, says the Lord of hosts. Who are you, O great mountain? Before Zerubbabel, you shall become a plain, and you shall bring forward the top stone amid shouts of grace, grace to it. So this is again a reminder that, you know what, when you're obedient to the Lord, that's all that matters. It's not power, it's not might, it's not reputation, it's God's Spirit moving and working. Jenny's making a money symbol.
It's not
money,
wealth. Yep.
It's not wealth. It is God's Spirit moving and working, and God will accomplish what God set out to do. So keep your eyes fixed on him, your hope fixed on him, and be obedient to him.
And I think before we move into your part, because I think that's definitely where we're resonating today, it is also at least helpful to note that there is a lot of these chapters in Zechariah 1-7 that dabble heavily into the visions and like the different I guess they're all visions that Zechariah has. They are definitely like strange for sure, and very very much reference to the book of Revelation. So you will, as you're listening to the reading today, you'll hear a lot of what we were talking about, but then specifically chapters like 5 to 7 are a lot of, well, actually, I guess 5 and 6. There's a lot of these visions in much more detail than what we gave reference to.
Yeah.
That we'll be reading in there. So just a little heads up.
So your part is don't despise small beginnings.
Correct.
If you are in a place where you feel authentically like you are being obedient, you're not just making yourself feel better. You really are being obedient to the Lord, and what you're seeing around you is a little bit confusing. Do not give up. Trust in him and follow him.
And I would also say too that if you are feeling like you're at a small beginning that is like meaningless or has very little like effect on whatever is around you, you're not being personally recognized. Really check your heart to see like, okay, what are my top priorities here? Is this like I want to glorify God and for his glory, or is this I want to glorify myself and for my own glory? I think that's a really important thing to do in most any aspect of your life, especially when you're feeling like, oh, these small initial steps, like why am I doing this? So thanks for joining us today for Zechariah. We'll be back again
tomorrow. See you then.
Thanks so much for listening to God's Plan, Your Part. If anything stuck out to you, if you have any questions, or if you'd like to receive a Bible, you can email us at godsplanyourpart@gmail.com. Also, if you're enjoying the podcast, please consider supporting us through the link in our description. We love that you're on this journey with us, and we hope you have a great day. See you tomorrow.